I want to dive straight into a question about oxytocin because I know that a lot of people know you in relation to the topic of trust. What happens to oxytocin in the era of physical and social distancing and increased remote work? And are there anything in terms of actions that you recommend people take to mitigate some of the harm that's happening in terms of physical distancing?
It's a great question. And we certainly have seen data on increased loneliness, increased depressive symptoms. So our brains evolved to be around other humans. So in a very real anatomical sense, we are social creatures. That is, our brain looks like other creatures that live in groups. So we need that group connection. And that connection activates pathways in the brain that release, for example, oxytocin. But oxytocin also reduces stress responses, improves the immune system. And so when we're isolated, we're less healthy, we're less happy, and we're more subject to disease. So I think we can mitigate that by facilitating greater connection via video conferencing, like we're doing now, phone calls. So we've actually shown that video conferencing in particular has about 80% of the oxytocin release as in-person interactions.
Really?
So it's not
high.
bad. Yeah, at least in the one study we did. So it's not as bad. And so how do we facilitate that and make it better? I can
If we
look at you.
touch fingers across the medium, does that increase it? Like, is it going up now?
No, I think it's
Yeah, we
really
got to
making
90% there.
that authentic emotional connection. So I can say, Stephen, how are you? You look tired. You look happy. Tell me how you are. And really inquiring about that emotional.
What do you mean I look tired?
Damn it. Get some more sleep. But, just making those emotional connections. So there's a simple trick that I think we can use for in-person meetings, but also virtual meetings, which is, again, most of that emotion is shown around the eye. So be present, look at people's eyes, and then just fill in the emotion you see. Instead of saying, hey, how are you? Good, how are you? Say, hey, you look tired, happy, sad, worried, anxious. And then we have a different conversation, right? We talk about, hey, you look like you're really having a great day. What's going on, right? So now we enter that emotional space. And from a kind of leadership perspective or leading a team or, it's really effective. Right now I'm getting all that emotional information from you, which is super valuable.
I love that as a specific action. Anything else you recommend like that to increase connection over Zoom? And we can back up from there, but while we're on the topic.
Yeah, so basically any positive social interaction will cause the brain to release at least some oxytocin to get those benefits. You can also do it through coordinated movements, singing, dancing. We could sing together. You want to sing? You guys, should we sing a couple bars or something? So any of that coordinated movement.
Just out of curiosity, I've seen several anandamide studies that also show anandamide is released with coordinated movement, chanting, those sorts of things. And are they working together in any way?
No,
I don't know. I don't know either. You just said it. I was just wondering. I don't think I knew oxytocin came from coordinated movement. Is it socially coordinated movement or internally, like my right and my left feet are tapping to the same beat? That's coordinated
socially
movement.
Coordinated. Good question. So we've done it with soldiers marching and people singing and prayer. So one reason we've done our work on religious rituals. We can talk about that, and non-religious rituals. But one value of doing something as a group, church, temple, something else, is you're doing it in a coordinated manner, and so that bonds you together physiologically. So yeah, I'm sure there's several mechanisms. So oxytocin facilitates the release of dopamine. So I get this little this is good for me to connect to the humans, and serotonin. So I get this potential kind of reduction in anxiety.
Can we, for folks, describe what oxytocin is? And then also, Paul, it'd be great for you to give a little bit of background as to how you came to focusing so deeply on it specifically.
Yeah, so oxytocin is a neurochemical, one of about 200 chemicals active in the brain. Ancient in origin, a version of that goes back at least 400 million years to fish, and it facilitates social interaction. So in fish, it facilitates sexual reproduction, which has risks, right? If I get close enough to this fish to have it fertilize me, I might instead become its lunch. In humans, it's the same thing. It helps modulate the approach withdrawal side of us. So I want to approach, I can get value from having relationships. So Steve and I met in Brazil, and we started hanging out and had fun, and it was a great time. But if he seemed too scary, then I would withdraw from him, right? So it's that kind of motivator for social interactions. So it's a natural chemical our brain makes, and it, like most things in nature, does multiple things in the body. I had done work on why countries are poor, which is like a really deep issue, right? The West is rich. Why isn't the rest of the world rich? And trust, interpersonal trust, was a factor that was extraordinarily important. And I did work talking about the kind of environments which facilitated high levels of interpersonal trust, formal and informal institutions, social institutions. And inevitably, people ask me, well, for a given environment, for a given country, why do two strangers ever trust each other? And I couldn't answer that question. And so I had to look for a mechanism. And again, I said in the top of the podcast, I'm a tool guy. And so there were tools to study oxytocin in animals, and really showed that animals kind of motivated social behaviors, but no real good tools in humans. The tool in animals was drilling into the skull and sampling brain fluid. I'm not really up on what the humans like and dislike, but I'm just guessing that wasn't the coolest way to do this. So we had to develop a tool to measure oxytocin release, and then eventually to shoot synthetic oxytocin into people's brains safely.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.